One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and his disciples began to pick some of the heads of grain, to rub them in their hands, and eat the kernels. So if you can imagine them walking through these fields, and as there's the heads of grain, they just grab a little bit. They're hungry, they don't have any food with them, and they start doing this to get the chaff off of the seed so they can eat the seed and chew it. It's kind of like trail mix for disciples. Some of the Pharisees asked, "Why are you doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?" So it's important to know that they're not breaking the law in general. It was actually the custom of the time to take care of the foreigner, to take care of the alien in your land, to take care of that individual that's passing through that doesn't have any food. They might be poor, they might not have packed enough, or they might not be able to provide for everybody in their party, to take only what they needed for food. And this is all they're doing. They're not taking extra. They're not going to go sell it. They're not, plundering the fields and stealing from the individual that owns that field. If you can imagine, we live in Wisconsin. If you can imagine a huge farm field full of corn, if you took one ear of corn, it's not going to damage the farmer's whole crop. If you took 12, not going to damage them. If you start taking a whole acre, that might be a problem depending on how much acreage they have, right? So right here, they're not breaking an actual law. It was actually lawful to do what they were doing. However, it was the Sabbath. And so the Pharisees, with their extra yoke that they are adding on, there were 613 mitzvot in the Tanakh, the Old Testament, and the Pharisees here added to that law to say that it's work to walk so many steps. It's work to walk anywhere else but the temple. It's work to, in this case, they're walking somewhere and they're taking the heads of grain. But that is not, according to the law of Moses, considered work. Jesus answered them, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God, and taking the consecrated bread, he ate what is lawful only for priests to eat, and he also gave some to his companions. Then Jesus said to them, 'The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath.'" What we're seeing here is that human need outweighs ritual observance. They're eating on the Sabbath. They're doing what the Pharisees considered work. It wasn't actually breaking the law. It was a ritual that they were breaking. It was a custom that they were breaking. And here in 1 Samuel 21:6, if you're not familiar, I recommend checking that out. What David did when he and his companions were hungry, they were on the run from Saul, who was trying to kill him and his men. And David at that time was a righteous man before God. He was fighting battles for Israel. He was God's anointed, and Saul had some jealousy. I believe that in that section it talks about Saul killed his hundreds and David his thousands or 10,000s. And so Saul was very jealous. He was also worried that David was going to take his kingdom, which David, as we see time and again, is not going to touch the Lord's anointed. He's not going to break the law to kill Saul, even though he could have multiple times. And in this case, he and his companions are hungry. He goes to the priest. He petitions to the priest, "Can we please have some of this bread that's just sitting here? God's not actually going to eat this bread. It's sitting on the altar. It's going to go stale, and then you're going to burn it up." And the priest says, "You know what? I shouldn't. I'm kind of afraid to do it, but I'll give it to you. You're a good guy. I know who you are. I know your reputation. I'm going to give it to you." And so David and his men ate, and then what Saul did was very wicked. He came to the town and ordered that those priests all be killed. And so those priests were put to the sword. One escaped, and then that man fled and told David and stayed with David and became a priest in his kingdom later on. What we're seeing again is that the human need outweighs the ritual observance. So if we're on our way to church and we're going to give a tithe, and let's say that tithe is $200, and we see somebody that's hungry on the side of the road with a sign, and they say, homeless, need food, and we give them $5 or $10, and now we only give $190 to God, I don't think that God is going to be upset with us. And again, that's between you and the Lord. If he's telling you to give 200 to him, then give that 200 to him, and then give 5 or 10 to the other individual. But what we're getting at here is that the human need in that situation, if somebody has a medical bill, if somebody just got hit by a vehicle and needs our assistance and we're 10 minutes late to church, oh no, our reputation might be tarnished a little bit, or we might be worried what somebody would say about us, but it's better for us to take care of that individual in need in the time of need, that human need outweighs the sacrifice. And so where Jesus and his companions were hungry as they're walking through on their ministry, them taking that bit of grain wasn't doing something that was unlawful. On another Sabbath, he went into the synagogue and was teaching, he being Jesus. And a man was there whose right hand was shriveled. Again, we're going to see the human need outweighs the ritual observance. Whose right hand was shriveled. And that right hand would likely have been the hand that he would have used for work. So this likely would have meant that he wouldn't have been able to work because most people were dominant with the right hand. And a lot of times in that culture, if you had some kind of disability like that, you were considered unclean. So this man who's suffering and has been suffering for a long time comes to Jesus. And the Pharisees and the teachers of the law were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. But Jesus knew, he already knew what they were thinking, and said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Get up in front of everybody." So he got up and stood there. Then Jesus said to them, "I ask you, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil? Rather to ignore this man in his need, or if I can serve this man in his need, to help him take care of his need?" Jesus says to save life or to destroy it. He looked around at them all. And then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." Because nobody answered him. They didn't answer. They were afraid to answer incorrectly, or afraid to look bad in front of somebody else. They were afraid that Jesus might rebuke them. Jesus looked around at them all. They didn't answer him. And then said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He did so, and his hand was completely restored. But they were furious and began to discuss with one another what they might do to Jesus.